Reddit, have you ever been part of a significant moment in someone's life and not found out until much later? Here is the story of the man who saved my life without ever knowing it. I was 22. Just recently kicked out of college, moved back in with my parents, and was going to the local community college while working as a clerk at the Chicago Board of Trade. Now, my bot job gave me access to tons of great stuff. Money for school, connections in Chicago, but mostly drugs. Every drug I ever wanted, the best prices, and the best quality. I took great advantage of this. To say I was depressed would be putting it mildly. I hated myself. I hated everything about me and what I had become. Let me take you through a typical day. Wake up at 3 AM and take the train to work. Eat painkillers and a Red Bull for breakfast. Get yelled at on the trading floor until 5 to 6 PM. Eat more painkillers. Go to school from 7 to 11 PM. Eat more painkillers. Go home, play video games, and eat more painkillers. Repeat. Repeat this every fucking day until the weekend came. The weekends weren't much different. I would simply add cocaine into the mix and stay up all night downing painkillers and snorting at minimum a gram or two of coke by myself. I was miserable. Add my habitual cutting routine in the mix and I can easily say this was the lowest point in my life. I thought about suicide almost every day and really can't explain how much I hated being me. Then one day I bumped into a friend from high school. We literally walked into each other while I was going from work to class. We were never great friends before, but he was a great guy always. We ended up grabbing coffee and agreed to see a movie the next week. At this point I had not hung out with anyone I would consider a friend in about 8 months. I was super excited. A friend, someone to talk to. We ended up having a great bromance night out, movie and hot wings. It was awesome. I was actually happy. From then on every week we would either see or rent a movie. I can't really explain why, but this changed me. I started caring about myself again. I started trying harder in school. I slowed and eventually stopped using drugs, and I didn't feel the need to cut anymore. To this day he has no idea that he literally saved my life. I have never really explained to anyone the massive impact he had on my life, and putting it all down like this is really causing me to tear up. My grandfather, to this day, always wears this big jacket and beret looking hat. When I was 3 or 4, as a joke, I decided to dress up as him and put the very oversized jacket and hat. He was also a smoker at the time, so I took a cigarette out of the pack in his jacket and put it in my mouth, biting the filter end completely by chance. I then went and showed him how I was dressed. I never really thought about it much, but 10 years later he would tell me that when he saw me with the cigarette in his mouth, facing the right direction, he decided to quit smoking on the spot. He thought I knew which end to put in my mouth. I definitely didn't, and therefore was teaching me how to smoke. He knew it was bad for him, and he didn't want to be a poor role model, so I guess it was significant for both our lives. He turns 90 this week, and is healthy as ever. I dated a 28-year-old girl when I was 22. She was divorced with a 6-year-old. I was obviously too young to deal with a 6-year-old, but tried to hang out with the kid as much as I could. His mom was a bit technically challenged, so I set up their PC, brought him some of my games, upgraded their PC from time to time with spare parts from my PC, etc. We finally broke up, and I thought that was that. 10 years later, I see her on Facebook, do the friend thing, and she asks if she can call me. Sure, why not? We speak for a bit, and she asks if her son can speak to me. He's now 16, and has a few things to say to me. Me and the son speak for about an hour in which he profusely thanks me for the times I spent with him and his PC games. Because of me he has gotten completely into building his own PCs and building the PCs of his friends at school. He loves gaming and says it reminds him of me. Never felt so honored and so horrified at the same time. Directionless, immature, 22-year-old me did something to change the course of someone's life. Made me think twice when dealing with people after that. I knew it was significant, but I didn't realize how. Years back, I arrested a guy for some child sex offenses. He was an older guy, had a couple of older daughters and a younger one, and was married. He and the wife had been together 20-something years. The guy was in great shape, had a very active job. His wife was less attractive, she had put on weight since the marriage, had kind of let herself go a bit. Incredibly sweet woman. So we arrest dad. The daughters are crying, weepy, "We love you dad." So's the wife. Not in a shitty way, just broken up. As the case winds its way through the courts, it becomes clear that dad's defense is my wife got fat and ugly, so it's her fault I had to do that kid sex stuff. Not only was that his defense, but it was what his parents/family believed. Basically, it's all the wife's fault, and his decision to play around with little kids is totally innocent. In addition, he spent the 2 to 3 years before his arrest online chatting with other pedos, and telling them what a fat ugly bitch he married. Scum. The prosecutor and I stayed in touch with the wife through the process, explaining to her what was going on, advising her of her options, making sure she understood what was going on. We gave her advance notice that he was going to try this crap, that he was saying evil, nasty things about her, rather than taking responsibility for his actions. And more importantly, that no one bought his crap, and no one blamed her for the matter. A couple years after that case went to bed, I was out in the suburbs doing a safety talk to a group of parents. The wife happened to be there, and came up to me before the talk. She told me for the first time that he'd been somewhat mentally abusive in the years leading up to the arrest. She'd never quite felt like she was good enough to leave him, if that makes sense. She told me that the prosecutor and I had given her the strength she needed to leave him and to cut him out of their lives. We kept telling her that it wasn't her fault and that she was better than he was, and it was what she needed to get out of there. It was a little reminder that a small thing, handling a victim properly, can have lasting repercussions. A friend of mine who moved away a couple of years ago actually messaged me on Facebook the other day about how I saved her life. She explained that she was anorexic in middle school when we were good friends, and there was one particular day that changed her outlook on life. It was teriyaki chicken day, best fucking lunch of the year, and she said she wasn't going to have any, wasn't hungry. I refused to take that answer because holy fuck, teriyaki chicken. I pulled her up to the line and made her eat her chicken, rice, fortune cookie and drink her chocolate milk. She told me that she went home that day and cried, finally realizing that someone did care. She said, "You probably saved my life that day. I just wanted to let you know how you changed me that day. I think about it every time I feel down." I cried so hard, tearing up a bit now remembering her message. I had no idea. I'm so glad 11-year-old me did that, because she is a beautiful, wonderful person, studying biology at a great school, living life to its fullest now. She's a Redditor too, so Ali, if you're reading this, I'm so glad you told me, and I hope you're doing well. 3. As a lifelong hospitality worker, going out of my way for people is pretty ingrained in my personality, and I regularly forget what an impact just being nice to people can have. On one particular night we had a reservation for a couple celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary, and they let us know in advance that the wife was in a wheelchair. No biggie, I arranged a table that was easy to access and equally close to entrance/bathroom, and removed a chair so that when they arrived they didn't have to go over these things. It can be embarrassing to have people make a fuss over you and your condition, so doing these things in advance helps. It turns out the wife wasn't just in a wheelchair, she was quadriplegic. All she could move was her face, even her neck was in a brace. Her husband was incredible, patient, attentive, loving. At the beginning of the meal he ordered for her, he cut her food and fed her before he touched his plate. When I would come by the table to see how they were doing, I tried to include her in the conversation, ask her questions, but her husband would always answer for her. It was like we were chatting through a translator. After their mains, I brought over the dessert menu and was talking them through the available options when I heard the wife murmur. Clearly she was struggling to speak, so I leant in and she asked me if we had any cheese. I explained to her the available selection, and when I brought it over gave a story about each of the cheeses in turn. It feels strange to be discussing these little details, because they are just run-of-the-mill things. The point is, at the end of the night they left, smiling, and both thanked me for a lovely night. A couple of weeks later my manager gave me a letter the husband had written to me. Not unusual, customers often write in afterwards to say thank you. But I choked up reading it. Apparently the wife had been quadriplegic for a couple of decades by that point, and for nearly that long they had spent their time alone, just the two of them, rarely leaving the house. The occasions when they did they had been treated as a nuisance by the general public, and it was so disillusioning to them that they became reclusive. The wife especially, who had not said a word to anyone outside family or doctors in over 10 years. He closed the letter by thanking me for their humanizing experience, a truly special anniversary gift, and that they now looked forward to enjoying many more nights like that one, after having missed out on so many. When I was about 10, my family took me to see some friends of theirs. This family had a little girl who was still crawling around everywhere. My 10-year-old brain thought, why are you walking like that? Just use 2 legs. Here, it's easy, I'll show you. Then, just as her parents entered the room, I guided her to taking her first steps. Turns out she was behind in development and her parents were unsuccessful in teaching her to walk. I couldn't understand why everyone around me was so ecstatic until recently, when my parents reminded me of the event. TL, doctor, taught a little girl to walk for the first. When I was in middle school we had a big end of school dance. This was during the time of silk shirts for the guys and puffy sleeves for the girls about mid-90s. During said dance, a girl who I knew, but was not into asked me to dance. Because my mom raised me right, I knew what kind of courage it took for her to do that, especially at that awkward age. We danced, probably to Boys I Men or something, and that was that. No biggie in my mind. About 20 years later on Facebook, she hits me with this. So I had this random memory of you yesterday, and felt like I should share it for some crazy reason. Please don't think I'm nuts. For some reason the memory of you dancing with me at the 8th grade dance entered my brain. I'm sure it's because Mother's Day is approaching. At that time was when my mom was really sick, and it was obvious that she wouldn't be here much longer. The day after the dance my family and I went to visit her in the hospital. When it was just the two of us in her room she asked me if I danced with someone. When I told her that I danced with you, she was so happy. She knew how big of a crush I had on you in middle school. As I thought about it, I realized that it was probably the last happy memory I had with her. It was soon after that she became sicker and died a few weeks later. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you for giving that to me. Mind blown. Thanks for teaching me unconditional respect, Mom.